All right, let's just jump right in. Mapping reality from objects to emergence. It's actually pretty wild to think about, but ancient humans were mapping the stars long before they ever fully mapped their own continents. Our drive to chart the unknown is literally hardwired into us. But today, we're going to look way beyond geography. We're embarking on this really ambitious journey to understand the fundamental structure of the cosmos itself. We're going to explore how mapping reality is basically the ultimate key to understanding everything, from a single atom all the way up to human civilization. So right off the bat, we kind of need to reframe how we think about this. What exactly is a map? You're probably picturing a geographic layout, or maybe just the GPS app on your phone pointing you to the nearest coffee shop, right? But a map at its absolute core is really a conceptual model. It's a tool we use to grasp complex reality. We use maps to take these massive, almost incomprehensible systems and distill them down into structures our minds can actually navigate. Basically, it's a way of seeing relationships that would otherwise be completely invisible to the naked eye. And just think about the sheer mind-boggling scale of what we actually map. We have Earth and weather maps, sure, but we also map the human body. We map digital and neural networks. We map atoms, molecules, cells, ecosystems. We even map galaxies and the large-scale structure of the universe stretching back, 13.8 billion years? Everything in the universe, from the chemical alphabet forged in the hearts of supernovas to the firing neurons in your own brain right now, can be understood as a map of relationships. Okay, Section 1, Objects, Relationships, and Systems. This right here, this is the intellectual spine of our whole explainer today. If you just look at a single, isolated piece of data, you're totally missing the forest for the trees. Here's how reality actually builds itself up. First, we have objects. These are the basic building blocks, like fundamental particles. But objects don't just sit still in a vacuum. They interact. And that creates relationships. Now, when you have enough relationships operating under specific local rules, they build systems. And when a system reaches a certain level of complexity, boom, we hit our fourth step, emergence. Which brings us to Section 2, the mystery of emergence. This is, without a doubt, absolutely one of the most profound concepts in all of modern science. It's the fundamental principle underlying the entire ascent of complexity in our universe. Emergence is the appearance of new properties at higher levels of organization that cannot be predicted from or reduced to the properties of the lower-level components. Let me say that again. How can the whole be fundamentally greater and entirely different than just the sum of its parts? If you want to know how chemistry became biology, or how early hominids developed cumulative culture and civilization, you absolutely have to understand emergence. To make this a bit more concrete, think about something you interact with literally every single day. Water. Hydrogen plus oxygen equals fluidity. If you study an isolated hydrogen atom in a lab, you are never going to find wetness. If you isolate an oxygen atom, you won't find surface tension. Those properties simply do not exist at that lower level. But when you put them together into a relationship, the emergent property of fluidity spontaneously appears. Simple components interacting to create profound complexity. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's totally grounded in verifiable science across some wildly distinct domains, all obeying the exact same underlying principles. Take a murmuration of starlings flying in the sky. The birds are just following three simple local rules: alignment, separation, and cohesion. There's no head bird acting as an avian choreographer yelling out dance moves, right? Yet a breathtaking, coordinated dance just emerges. The exact same thing applies to the human brain. Individual neurons just firing or not firing, ultimately producing consciousness and mathematical reasoning. Even economic markets, individuals just buying and selling based on personal interest, result in incredibly complex economic cycles and global innovation. Simple, local rules, staggering emergent complexity. Moving on to Section 3, Setting Epistemic Boundaries. Okay, so as we map out these incredible systems, we have to be super careful about drawing boundaries between what we can objectively measure and what it all actually means. On one side, we have established scientific knowledge. This is empirical, it's measurable, it's verifiable. It's knowing the exact temperature of the cosmic microwave background or the specific properties of water. On the other side, we have philosophical interpretation. These are the deep questions of meaning, purpose, and the whole debate between reducing things down to their simplest parts versus viewing them as a whole. Both are totally essential to the human experience, for sure, but we have to honor the rigorous delineation between them. Science tells us how the universe assembled its periodic table inside stars. Philosophy and interpretation ask why there is something rather than nothing in the first place. And that brings us to Section 4, the fragmentation of knowledge. This highlights a really massive modern crisis, the fragmentation of knowledge, which is sometimes called the knowledge silo paradox. Never before in the history of human civilization have we possessed such a vast amount of data across so many different scientific fields. Just let this number sink in for a second. 37 trillion. That is the estimated number of cells in the human body. We only know this because of brilliant, incredibly rigorous biological research. But this staggering number also perfectly illustrates the sheer, overwhelming volume of fragmented data humanity has collected. I mean, we have millions of scientific papers, petabytes of data, but often the physicist isn't talking to the biologist, and the biologist definitely isn't talking to the economist. So here's the absolutely crucial takeaway. Isolated facts hide universal patterns. While we have these massive mountains of data kept neatly in separate little silos, keeping them isolated prevents us from seeing the profound relational patterns that actually govern reality. Think of it this way. Just like an isolated hydrogen atom won't tell you a single thing about the ocean, an isolated scientific field won't tell you about the underlying unity of the cosmos. Which leads to our final part, Section 5, a map of universal unity. So, what's the fix for all this fragmentation? Well, we desperately need a conceptual atlas. We need a structured mapping of human knowledge that actively bridges the relationships between these isolated scientific fields. We need to actually see how the Big Bang connects to the formation of atoms, which then connects to biology, which ultimately connects to the cumulative culture that allows us to build civilizations in the first place. And a conceptual map like this, it can't just be some top-down dogma. It has to be built in layers, stabilizing the hard science before we start layering on the philosophy. It must be designed for cumulative evolution, exactly like how each human generation builds on the discoveries of the last. It has to firmly separate what we know empirically from what we're just hypothesizing. And most importantly, it must connect decentralized nodes of knowledge, rather than relying on one fragile central point. Which leaves us with one final kind of mind-bending thought to wrap up this explainer. If everything, from atoms to galaxies to human consciousness itself, operates on these exact same shared principles of relationships and emergence, what is the Atlas actually trying to connect? Are we just cataloging random facts, or are we finally uncovering the hidden architecture of reality itself? Definitely something to think about the next time you look at a map. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I cannot wait to explore more of these connections with you soon.